Mine, please.
It's awesome.
And Shane's like, fuck, and he got a really good promo, right? So, all right. But Shane likes talking, so he don't mind doing it again. Shane cuts another promo. She pops out. 20 takes. Had to be 20 takes. Shane's furious by the end. We're laughing our balls off. And all she had to say was one line, like, I told you. So I just got me like 5 words or something ridiculous.
I remember the whole locker room.
Oh, it's hilarious.
What's your opinion of Shane Douglas?
I like Shane. I like Shane.
Yeah.
I think he's a good guy. I think he's a good worker. I think he's a great seller. I always thought that he had a big future ahead of him. Remember the first time he stuck out of my mind was he was in a singles match. He was one of the dynamic dudes, but he was having a singles match with Arn. And there's certain things that stick out of my mind about people and stuff. And with him, he had a singles match with Arn, and Arn was working over his arm, his left arm. And finally, he couldn't use his arm anymore. Arn had beat it so badly that he couldn't use it. And but he wouldn't give up, and the ref, stopped the match, to save him from being further hurt. And his selling was so tremendous. I was like, man, this guy's gonna be a star. His selling was phenomenal.
Okay. Going back, Cactus Jack, his anti-hardcore gimmick. What's your memories of that?
That was absolutely tremendous. He decided he wasn't gonna be hardcore anymore, so he was gonna, he was gonna wrestle because he thought he was killing himself. And the fans didn't appreciate it because he was with me, and that's how he turned heel. And so he cut and I think the single best promos I've ever heard in my entire life were the ones he cut then in ECW at that time period. And I was lucky enough to be with him. My brainwashing brought him to my side, made him a heel. He cut this 10-minute promo, and then I would go quote the Raven Nevermore and steal all the heat. But it was absolutely the best string of promos I've ever heard in my life. It was just. He would bring in so many disparate points, and you're thinking, how the fuck is he going to tie all these together? It was like a Seinfeld episode, because at the end he would tie all these things that had nothing to do with one another into this great whole, and you're just like, wow. He's like, yeah, and my aspiration was to one day cut a promo of that caliber. And I actually finally one day I did cut one in Revere, the dog track. That was the first time, and the first and only time that I thought that I cut something of that caliber.
In the stairwell? Was it that one?
No, not that one. That was my. I was still getting there. I hadn't got there yet. It was the one when I was sitting against the wall drinking a beer, and that was really the only time I've ever thought that I did anything that was of that magnitude. But Cactus stuff was just off the page. Just beyond brilliant. And so his gimmick was it wasn't going to be hardcore anymore. So he would just grab a headlock and sit in a headlock for like 10 minutes, and people would just, they were furious at ECW. They're a hardcore hero. And now he won't even do anything hardcore, let alone, now he's sitting in a rest hold. So they actually, the first time I ever seen it, they actually started a wave in a wrestling match. And the wave went around like 5 times just because the people were so fucking fed up and bored and, So I told Cactus the next week, I came up with one idea that was pretty cool. I go, listen, next week when you fight Tommy, because I guess he didn't fight Tommy then. Tommy's going to fight you. Tommy's going to try to get you to be hardcore again. So when he does, man, throw him out to the floor. The place will fucking erupt. So fucking Cactus said, I like this idea. So he did it. So he throws Tommy out to the floor. And the place is like, yes. Because finally, I remember it was, Tommy's beating on Cactus, right? Come on, be hardcore, be hardcore. Finally, Cactus gets mad. You motherfucker. Throws him out to the floor. And the place roars. Grabs a headlock on the floor, takes him over and sits on the floor in a headlock. Oh, it was fucking brilliant.
Was there any, was it hard keeping that Sandman and Dreamer feud going for that long and keeping it fresh?
No. But, the Dreamer thing finally, we finally had to move on because, I don't know how long it lasted. It never really ended until I left because he never beat me until I left. But for the most part, it ended whenever the Sandman one started. You know what I mean? Or maybe before that, maybe before the show. I think it was him, then the Shane, then I think they brought in a bunch of guys to face me while I had the title. So me and Tommy had some breather, and then I think the Shane thing, and then some other guys, and I went to rehab, or maybe Sandman. Maybe went to rehab, then Sandman, I think, or Sandman, rehab, Sandman, I don't remember.
Yeah. What about the Terry Gordy match? Do you have any memories of that?
Yeah, that was one of the proudest moments of my career. Paulie said it was in Paulie's mind, that was one of the 5 best matches I ever had. I think he said that, the Goldberg match, maybe Dreamer's last match, I think for 3, that's about it. I'll put the Rhino match in there from the pay-per-view. the hardcore match me and Rhino had, put that in there too, in my opinion. But what's so great, what I was so proud about was that when the match was over, like Terry Gordy was a legend. You know, for the time he was a natural. He started working when he was 14. He was so young they had to put a hood on him because he was 14 years old, and just became one of the all-time greatest workers, and just the greatest brawler, and but he could work, man. He was charismatic, and everything looked great that he did. And then he had that the coma, or whatever. I mean, I guess he went into a coma.
Yeah.
And when he came out, his brain was never the same. You know, he had brain damage, and his work was never the same either. And for one night, and when that match, and he hadn't wrestled in America in a while, but the reports all from Japan were that Terry Gordy no longer could work like he did, you know. And then after we had that match, the buzz in the industry was Terry Gordy's back. I think, and I remember in a bunch of the sheets and everything, they go, man, the old Terry Gordy's back. And then of course Terry worked somebody else the following week, and Terry wasn't back. And then everybody realized it was kind of my match. I mean, so I was really proud of the fact that I was able to bring out the last, you know, that I had enough knowledge and skill to make Terry look like the old Terry, just if not at least for one night. You know what I mean? Yeah. And that was the last great match. It was a hell of a match too. Yep. There's some barbed wire in it. Stevie got involved, and it was cool, man. Yeah. I remember getting goosebumps. I remember, yeah, because I was a huge Freebirds fan. Like, I wanted to be Michael Hayes. That's what I wanted to be. Like, you know, when I was from the time I was like 18 or 19, I guess when I was in college, we used to get that UWF TV. I was like, man, I want to be Michael Hayes. You know, this was Michael Hayes of the original Freebirds. Not Michael Hayes of Jimmy Jam, not Michael Hayes of later years, but Michael Hayes of the Freebirds. When he looked like Greg Allman, when he was fucking, when he was a heel, but he was a commentator. Him and Jim Ross were tremendous as a commentating team in the UWF. But he was, because he got over, he did what no other heel commentator did, was he got over the psychology of the heel, which is what I always tried to do when I did commentary. Was I choose to try and tell the story the boys are telling. Like, it always blew my mind. Commentators would never tell. Like, the boys go to all this trouble to tell a story in a match, and half the time the commentator doesn't even talk about it. So I made it a point to tell the story the boys are telling, you know, so it's easier on them. And I got it from Michael Hayes. But he was so cool. He was a pretty motherfucker. You know, he got all the chicks. He drank all the booze, fucked all the chicks, snorted all the coke. You know, he was just the coolest guy in the room. And I said, fuck, I want to be him. You know what I mean? And that's all my early characters had a fucking Michael Hayes thing to them. You know what I mean?